This is the story of a family quietly fracturing under the weight of a scandal that simply refuses to go away. Andrew, Fergie, Beatrice and Eugenie, the York family, are living separate, increasingly hidden lives right now. And today we're pulling back the curtain on exactly what's going on, what the royal experts are saying, and why two young women are paying the price for choices that were ultimately never theirs. Right, let's get into it. So, Andrew is holed up in Norfolk. Fergie was spotted hiding away in a lavish ski chalet in Austria, reportedly costing £2,000 a night no less. And their daughters, Beatrice and Eugenie, have been keeping their heads firmly below the parapet. On the surface, it looks like this family has quietly gone their separate ways. But is that really the full picture? According to people who have spent years watching the Yorks up close, absolutely not. But before we get to what's really happening behind closed doors, we need to understand how we got here. Because this isn't a new story. This is a story that has been building for years, and it has now reached what feels like a tipping point. Now, for those of you who need a little refresher, and there's no shame in that, this is a complicated family, let's go back to the beginning. Andrew and Sarah Ferguson, both now 66 years old, divorced in 1996. It was one of the most talked about splits of the 90s. Fergie, as she's universally known, had already been photographed in that rather infamous incident in the south of France with her financial advisor. A story that scandalized the nation and had the tabloids absolutely beside themselves with excitement. The marriage ended, the press had a field day, and most people assumed that was that. But here's the thing. Andrew and Fergie never really split in the way most divorced couples do. They remained extraordinarily close. Bizarrely, wonderfully, confusingly close, depending on your point of view. For years, they continued to share the same home. Royal Lodge in Windsor Great Park, that rather magnificent grace and favour house that Andrew had been granted, became their shared base. Two divorced people living under one roof, raising their daughters together. The press dubbed them the happiest divorced couple in the world, and honestly, it wasn't entirely wrong. They attended events together, they holidayed together, they presented a united front for their girls. In many ways, Andrew and Fergie's post-divorce relationship appeared to be more functional than a great many marriages. It was unconventional, yes. It was eyebrow-raising, certainly. But for them, and for Beatrice and Eugenie, it worked. And their daughters, they adored both their parents. Still do, by all accounts. Beatrice, now 37, and Eugenie, 36, grew up in a home where, despite all the drama, Mum and Dad remained a team. So when we talk about the Yorks drifting apart now, we need to understand just how unusual that is. Because for this family, staying together, even after divorce, even after scandal, was simply what they did. The fact that they are now publicly distancing themselves from each other tells you something about just how serious the current situation has become. Now that brings us to Jeffrey Epstein. Now I know, we've heard the name so many times. The scandal has been going on for years. It feels at times like it will never end. And that, actually, is precisely the point. Because that's exactly what royal expert Duncan Larcombe, former royal editor of The Sun and author of Prince Harry, The Inside Story, said when speaking to The Mirror recently. He described the Epstein scandal as something that seems to have no end, just rumbling on and on. And he's right. The release of the Epstein files by the US Congress was a watershed moment. Millions of documents, correspondence, flight logs, internal communications were made available to the public. And the York family, to put it gently, did not come out of that well. Andrew's name appeared throughout the files, as many of you will already know. His friendship with Epstein had already been the subject of that catastrophic BBC Newsnight interview back in 2019, the one that ended his public royal duties. The one that his team must have thought couldn't possibly go as badly as it did, and yet somehow managed to go even worse. That interview, and the scandal surrounding it, effectively ended Andrew's public life. He lost his military titles, his royal patronages, his HRH. He retreated to Royal Lodge, and he has been there, largely in private, ever since. But the release of the Epstein files brought fresh pain. Because this time, it wasn't just Andrew's name in the documents. Sarah Ferguson's name was there too. And this is the part that must feel deeply, deeply unfair. So were the names of Beatrice and Eugenie. These are two young women who were not accused of anything. But their names are in those files, and in today's world, that is enough to drag you into a spotlight you never asked for and never deserved. What kinds of mentions? Well, there is a crude reference in what appears to be a message sent by Fergie herself, referencing Eugenie's, how shall we put this, shagging weekend. There is a request from Epstein that one of your daughters show someone around Buckingham Palace. And there are documents suggesting the York sisters visited Epstein with their mother shortly after his release from prison in 2010. None of this makes them guilty of anything. Their mother was friends with this man. You go places your parents take you. You trust the adults around you. But as Duncan Larcombe put it, they are very unfortunate victims to be caught up in it all. And I think most reasonable people would agree with that assessment. So, let's talk about where each of the four Yorks currently stands, and what is really going on beneath the surface. Andrew, as we mentioned, is at Marsh Farm in Norfolk. This is where he has retreated, away from the public gaze, away from the cameras, away from the circus. He remains largely out of public view, and those close to him say visitors have been few and far between of late. Fergie, meanwhile, was photographed and reported to be staying in a lavish ski chalet in Austria, £2,000 a night. Now, some of you might be raising an eyebrow at that figure, given Fergie's well-documented financial difficulties over the years. She famously ran up enormous debts in the 90s and has spoken openly about her money struggles. But Sarah Ferguson has always had a remarkable talent for finding her way into comfortable circumstances, and it seems that talent has not deserted her. Her staying apart from Andrew at this particular moment has led many to speculate that she is deliberately distancing herself from him, performing a kind of public separation to avoid the Epstein taint. And Duncan Larcombe, who knows this family well, believes that is exactly what it is. A performance, a PR move. His words were quite striking, actually. He said, "My personal hunch is that it's a public relations move. I don't think she's any nearer ditching Andrew than she ever was." And then he added something rather pointed. Her links to Epstein might have been different from Andrew's, but they were still strong. And so it would be pretty hypocritical if she just said, "Oh, how dare you be friends with a man like that," when clearly she's been a friend of the man like that herself. Fergie appeared in those files too. She was friends with Epstein. She cannot simply wash her hands of the whole business and present herself as the wronged party. Whatever distancing she is doing right now is, according to those who know her, likely to be temporary and tactical rather than permanent. Now let's talk about the daughters. Because this is the part of the story that, frankly, I find most affecting. Beatrice and Eugenie have spent their adult lives trying to carve out their own identities. As working women, as wives, as mothers, as people with lives entirely separate from the endless drama that seems to follow the Windsor family. They are not working royals in the traditional sense. They don't receive public funding. They have their own careers, their own families, their own private lives. And yet, time and time again, the sins, or at least the controversies, of their parents come crashing back into their world. Duncan Larcombe spoke about this and said, "I can't imagine how horrible it would be for Beatrice and Eugenie. Both their parents embroiled in this scandal, which is a scandal that seems to have no end. I actually feel really quite sorry for them. I think, what can they do? What can they say? And you know, they've done their best to be part of the royal family. They haven't rebelled against it like certain members of the family. And in many ways, they're hung out to dry. Hung out to dry. That's a powerful phrase. And it speaks to something genuinely unfair about the situation these two women find themselves in. The response from both sisters has been to keep an extremely low profile. They skipped Easter with the wider royal family this year. Beatrice spent the holiday with her husband Edoardo Mapelli Mozzi's family, a decision that, according to a source close to the couple, had been planned for a long time. They are, the source said, just getting on with their lives as much as they can. Which, when you think about what they're dealing with, seems both entirely understandable and quietly heartbreaking. Eugenie, meanwhile, has been similarly quiet. She and her husband Jack Brooksbank and their children have been keeping to themselves. Eugenie has always struck me as the more resilient of the two sisters. She has a certain quiet steel to her, but even she must be finding this period exhausting. Larkham was asked whether he thought the sisters would ultimately distance themselves from their parents permanently. His answer was instructive. He said, "I think they're a close-knit family, and ultimately, family is stronger than anything else. I don't, personally, from my experience of dealing with them all, think that they'll exorcise their parents because of the media. They're trying to keep their distance at this time because they don't want to be associated with it, frankly." So the distance we're seeing between Andrew and Fergie, between parents and daughters, is, according to those who know this family best, a managed retreat, a tactical withdrawal, not a permanent rupture. So where does this all go from here? Let's think through the possibilities. For Andrew, the outlook is, let's be honest, rather grim. He is unlikely to ever return to public royal life. That ship has sailed, sunk, and gone to the bottom of the ocean. What he has left is his daughters, and whatever remains of his relationship with Fergie. If Larkham is right, and the public distance between Andrew and Fergie is largely performative, then at some point, once the current media intensity dies down, we may well see them quietly reunited again. Whether living together again, I couldn't say. But the idea that this woman, who spent 30 years as Andrew's closest companion after their divorce, has suddenly and permanently walked away from him, I'm not sure I entirely buy it. For Fergie, the situation is complex. She has spent decades navigating between rehabilitation and fresh scandal. She wrote her memoirs, she appeared on Oprah, she had a very public struggle with money, with the media, with her own image. And then, slowly, she rebuilt something. She became a successful author of children's books. She appeared on television. She got herself back to a place where people quite liked her again. A warm, slightly chaotic, but fundamentally decent figure. The Epstein files are a problem for that narrative. Her name in those documents is inconvenient, to say the least. But Sarah Ferguson has survived worse. I wouldn't count her out. For Beatrice and Eugenie, and this, I think, is the most important thing to say, the path forward is probably exactly the one they're already on. Keep quiet. Stay out of the headlines. Focus on your families, your children, your private lives. The storm will pass. It may take months, it may take years, but it will pass. Larkham said something that I think is worth ending on. He noted that Beatrice and Eugenie have done their best to be part of the royal family and haven't rebelled against it. They played by the rules, they showed up, they did what was asked of them. And in return, they find themselves caught in a scandal entirely not of their making. So, what have we learned today? We've learned that the York family's apparent fragmentation, Andrew in Norfolk, Fergie in Austria, the girls keeping to themselves, is, at least in part, a managed retreat rather than a genuine rupture. The bonds in this family run deep, deeper, arguably, than in many other royal households. Andrew and Fergie's strange, enduring, post-divorce partnership is not something that dissolves easily. And a mother's bond with her daughters, however complicated the circumstances, doesn't simply evaporate because the newspapers are having a difficult few months. We've learned that Beatrice and Eugenie are, in the blunt words of one expert, hung out to dry. caught in something they had no hand in creating, unable to escape it, doing the only sensible thing available to them, which is to quietly get on with their lives and wait for the world to find something else to talk about. Will Andrew ever be fully rehabilitated? Almost certainly not in any official capacity. Will the family come back together privately when the cameras aren't looking? Most experts who know them think yes. Will Beatrice and Eugenie eventually be free of this? One can only hope so. If you enjoyed this video, do give it a like. It genuinely helps more people find the channel. And if you're new here, we cover stories like this every week, so do subscribe and come back. I'll see you next time.